A new poll shows Senator Bernie Sanders and Vice President Joe Biden beating President Trump in a head-to-head matchup. And it appears the commander-in-chief's cursing is upsetting evangelicals.
Team Rising is here to break it down. Stephen Cobb, former Obama administration appointee, previously served as the Deputy Attorney General of Virginia, and Gabby is a White House reporter for Politico. Thank you to you both.
Hey guys.
Thanks for having us.
So, I mean, Crystal and I have been talking a lot about this poll, which is about the notion of electability, Stephen, and it goes to the heart of one of the main things you've asked these Democratic candidates is part of the reason that a lot of them support Joe Biden is because they think he can win back voters that Trump supported. Crystal's been talking a lot about how Bernie Sanders actually could do equally, if not as good a job as Joe Biden. What do you think?
Well, I think one of the things that these polls have shown us is that there is an overwhelming support for Democratic candidates across the board against President Trump. But one of the things we don't want to look too far down the road on is some of these head-to-head matchups and what would be a popular vote scenario versus an electoral college. I would actually be very surprised in 2020 if the Democratic nominee for president does not win the popular vote. It's an issue of where we're able to mobilize voters and how that comes into electoral success.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Gabby, the thing that literally every poll, this one is very similar to a lot of other head-to-head matchup polls. It's early, things could change, all the caveats in the world. But there seems to be this foundational assumption in media and in like Democratic elite circles that Biden is electable and Bernie is not. And the polls just don't bear that out. That just isn't what's reflected at this point in the data.
Right, and that's what Bernie has been saying all along. One of the reasons why his team is so frustrated with the coverage that he's been getting and the treatment from Democratic elites over the course of his campaign. One thing, though, that was interesting in this poll is that Biden trounced Bernie when it came to support among suburban women. 24% gap between potential presidential candidate Joe Biden and Donald Trump in a head-to-head matchup. And that's, I think, where the Trump campaign is at least looking to see, okay, which candidate on the Democratic side are we really competing with the demographic group that we most need to do well
Gabby,
with?
help me understand that too, because President Trump loves to boost Joe Biden. It seems like he's the person that he might want to go up against. But then there's also this narrative that they want to boost the far left candidates like Bernie Sanders to paint the Democrats all that way. Who do you think that they would most like to run against in 2016?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah,
I wish I had the answer.
Yeah.
You know, I talked to a lot of Trump campaign officials who have said that Joe Biden, they think, is beatable, despite all of the polling that we've seen. Essentially, they're banking on him not making it out of the primary, or if he does, having to embrace some of the positions that Bernie Sanders has espoused, some of the positions that Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, positions that would be more progressive than Joe Biden would have otherwise supported or embraced. And at that point, they think he'll be just as socialist as the rest of the field.
But in a less authentic way.
Right.
So
but
you're not only, you have the lefty
Mm-hmm.
positions, which I dispute the idea that they're not popular. I mean, if you look at the polling, a lot of the Bernie Sanders positions are actually very popular. But if you're embracing them from a place of inauthenticity, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
Right, and one of the things, what I would love to see in one of these polls is the generic Democratic candidate. Sometimes you'll see the poll to say, would you support the Democratic candidate over President Trump? And right now, I think you'd see a lot of those same numbers.
Yeah, I mean,
probably somewhere between the Mayor Pete and Biden. I think they'd probably come in probably at a 52-48
no, because actually in the majority of polls, it's Biden and Bernie who are winning in these head-to-head matchups. Everybody else is either a tie or is losing. Now look,
what's I was saying is polls.
It's all a good point, right? Which is that head-to-heads are not, the best thing to look at and all that. I think the suburban women point is interesting. Why do you think, Stephen, that there is a suburban female reluctance to support Bernie Sanders? Where does that come from?
I think it's a more moderate voting bloc. And so it's those kitchen table issues. And I know Crystal and I tend to disagree on some of these issues, but I think when you're talking about kind of mainstream centrist policy, that's what appeals to suburban voters, be they women or men. And that's why I think that Biden has that larger
I think if you look at the Sanders coalition, it tracks very closely with income levels. So the higher up you go on the income scale, the less support that he has. And the suburban women that we have in mind, the sort of white suburban woman, is educated, has a fairly high income, makes sense just fitting into the coalition that she's going to be more skeptical of him than more working class voters who have found more to like there. You have an interesting piece, Gabby.
Gabby has a new piece out this morning from Politico saying using the Lord's name in vain, evangelicals chafe at Trump's blasphemy or profanity. Gabby, I guess just explain a little bit about what's going on here. A lot of people are going to read that headline and go, really? The profanity?
Right. Yeah, no, that's sort of what I thought in a lot of my conversations with evangelical leaders who have expressed concern about the president's casual use of terms that many Christians would deem irreverent or just completely inappropriate.
So for like being a little specific, what are the things that really set them up? It's the internet, so we don't care what you say.
It was the word goddamn.
Yeah, the one that really
which
got him.
is fine.
Yeah, and he's used it in different contexts. He also uses the word hell a lot. He'll say, "Get the hell out of our country," in reference to
what the hell do you have to lose?
Right.
Yeah.
He uses the word damn at his CPAC speech in March. It was just laced with profanities.
It was,
and a lot of these supporters are saying, look, at these rallies where he's just using this language so loosely, it's not just adults who are there, it's children. And I've been at upwards of 50 Trump rallies at this point, and I cannot tell you the number of times that I've been sitting in the press pen with a number of other reporters and just heard people behind me yelling the F word, or people behind me
or wearing shirts that say Trump that bitch, or whatever.
Right. And there are children present, and it is starting to irk a lot of evangelicals, but at the same time, is it going to jeopardize his support among them? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I was
that's
kind of taken aback. I read your article this morning. I was like, well, everyone I guess has their thing. It wasn't the bearing false witness against thy neighbor and over 1,000 lies since he's taken office. It wasn't committing adultery numerous times for these evangelical voters, apparently, but the line was drawn at profanity.
They're annoyed by it, but at the end of the day, he's going to appoint a pro-life judge, and that's all.
Right, but
that's
why
the thing is
annoyed by the one and not the other?
People can justify lots of things in their mind, right? They can justify different, well, that's not how I would do it or whatever, but if you look at the totality, but the language is so at odds.
Right.
And you can't ignore it, you can't hide. It's so visible and so an integral part of his presentation that it makes sense to me that would be the piece that they have trouble ignoring or explaining away.
And one of the people that I spoke with for this article, Senator Paul Hardesty, he's a West Virginia state Democratic senator, he was the one who received multiple calls from constituents who were watching that rally in Greenville, North Carolina last month to complain about the president using words like goddamn.
Really?
And he told me, look, I represent a district that is full of Bible Belt, Bible believing, God-fearing people, and that's just a line too far for them.
That's so interesting.
It is.
But I don't
it's just
see,
interesting to me that that's the line.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see Jerry Falwell. I mean, I don't see Franklin Graham or Jerry Falwell Jr. They're not going to say anything about this.
They didn't.
Yeah.
I interviewed Jerry Falwell, and he said, I prefer that the president wouldn't use this language, but it's not going to. We're not going to claim moral superiority at any point.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, my own view is that the evangelical community's embrace of this president, the language is just like this very visible signifier, but the immigration policies, I mean, so much of what he does is so contrary to the teachings. I think they're going to have a real problem of seeming very hypocritical among younger generations as well.
What would Jesus do mantra doesn't necessarily match up with the administration.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. Both of you sit tight. We have more coming up right after this.